Well, good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to obviously introduce our illustrious panel here this afternoon. We've got an awful lot to get through, so I'm going to be very quick. Jehangir Byramji is the Innovation Lead for Emerging Technologies at Lloyds Banking Group. We have Samantha Seaton, is CEO of Moneyhub, and Moneyhub is obviously the open banking, open finance, and open data platform award-winning. We're also delighted that Jerzy Biernacki, Chief AI Officer at Miquido, is here, and straight off the plane from the US, Louis, the co-founder and CEO of Eigen Technologies. So thank you to all of you for coming here today. So we've got a lot to cover in 20 minutes. We're going to talk about who controls the future. Is it humans? Is it machines? We intend to cover creative capabilities and what they mean, particularly in AI. And we're also going to leverage what effective human-technology partnership is going to look like in the future of financial services. So a tall order to do in 20 minutes. So firstly, let me open up with the first panel, if I may. And I'm just going to ask for some quick snippets from you all. What are you thinking about in terms of the future for today, and what do you think will be the greatest change in financial services? So let's start at the top. How are you thinking about the future?
I think the future is really bright, Claire. I think this panel is about emerging technology. People and businesses have used technology to date predominantly to be tools. And when we built tools, they didn't really help us with future tools. So building the horse and cart didn't help us build the train. With AI, I think that's about to change. We're about to move into a world where we're going to collaborate with the technology that we are building. And that's going to create a whole world of great excitement, potentially some new risks, certainly some opportunities. And I think, therefore, the future is really bright.
Thank you. Sam?
Well, I think the biggest impact will be that we will actually be able to make an impact on a lot of people and their money that we've not been able to traditionally reach in financial services before. So for me, if we can collaborate so that the technology, the legislation, and the people come together to really benefit, I think we'll have achieved an outstanding situation.
Okay, so I think generative AI is going to be the future and it's going to shape it. New Future of Work report released by the end of last year cited a number of reports saying that using Gen AI we can increase the performance of text-related tasks by 40%, we can double the speed of decision-making processes, and the quality of work performed by agents using generative AI is generally is 40% better and evaluated 40% better than the ones not using it. So I think it's really going to change the way we work.
If you think about what a financial institution is, it is nothing more than a financial products, which is a file of contracts, and an IT system, right? And all the processes that we think about is really around connecting our financial products and our paperwork with the systems. Right now, the operations are grossly disconnected. There are lots of challenges around that. So I think the financial institution of the future is a programmatic system that really connects these two. And AI can help us achieve that.
So Louis, let's just build on that. I mean, sometimes to look forward, we have to look back. So if we look back, what are the learnings that we've taken over the last few years?
I think the fundamental learning is that, there are two things, right? One is applying AI is, you should just get started, right? I think this industry is moving so quickly that if you don't get started, if you don't build any muscle memory, you're just going to be so far behind. And indeed, we see some of the financial institutions or even hedge funds or buy-side shops that are able to adopt quickly, they're able to keep up with the change. That's the first learning. The second learning actually is a little bit counterintuitive, is that AI is a lot more complex, and some of the implications of the AI are second, third order impact that could be much bigger than you would think. So think about the New York Times case against OpenAI. Who knows what's going to happen? right? So I think it's really around balancing both the unknown of the AI future, which because there are so many complexities raveled around it, but at the same time, in order to manage that, you have to start building muscle memory.
Jerzy, for you, what have you learned over the last decade that you're taking forward?
Yeah, so from my technical point of view, I think the two most important things that we've learned is that data is as important as it was before. You always heard that you need to keep your data sets huge, you need to have it clean, and this is as true now for generative AI as it was before for classic machine learning models. And the other thing is that basically we need to make sure that machine learning models are guardrailed, because these models are probabilistic by their nature, and they're always going to fail at some point, and we need to make sure that we have some guardrails in place.
Thanks, Jerzy. Well, let's bring Sam in if we can at this point, which is, we've talked a lot today about the data ownership and the challenges of data ownership, but what do you see in there, and who owns who has the power of data ownership as you look forward?
Well, I think at the moment, the consumer owns the data. I don't think that's really up for much debate, but I don't think we have any power. So, you know, we were talking about this before, but, you know, like I use Google Maps, and I would prefer to pay for Google Maps, like a monthly subscription, and Google not to have my data. But I don't get that choice. And, you know, Google Maps has saved my marriage a number of times, so I'm not about to, you know, get divorced, just so I can, you know, like, live without Google Maps. So, you know, so I think the consumer at the moment is in a compromised position. I do think that will change over time, because going back to your point, the one thing that I think we must remember with AI is underlying the AI is the data, and we still, as an industry, have not got our heads around the data. And we not only need to get our heads around the data, it's got to be more up to date. It's like, it's got to be real time, because that's the only way we can make really good use of what we get. And, you know, we were talking also about, you know, you look at companies like Facebook, who are just doing this effortlessly, and I mean effortlessly, and have been, looking back, for years. So we've got quite a lot of catching up, I would say.
So let's bring Lewis back in. I mean, in terms of data, we've talked a lot about that, but if we switch to Gen AI, something that you focus on an awful lot, how do you see it evolving? What are your thoughts on Gen AI evolvement?
Yeah. We're at a real crossroads here with generative AI. I think, and I think what's going to happen in the courts in America is really fundamentally going to change the direction. So there is a future in which, and I hope this is not the dystopian future, in which we let Sam Altman and sort of the large tech companies, to your point, Sam, own our consumer data, you know, really crush the creatives, and, you know, basically say, look, like, actually, as a Gen AI company, I can suck in anything I want and monetize that regardless of ownership and IP. I think that's a really dangerous future. That's a future that's going to be, you're going to see one of the largest transference of IP and wealth in the world. So there's one future in which, you know, I think we need to be careful of. There's another future, which I think, a more positive future, which I think is where, back to the point about data, consumers, institutions, and creatives are able to control their data, own their data, say whether they want that data to go into a model or not go into a model. And in the same time, I think that will herald a much deeper sensibility around AI governance and AI responsibility, which I think that's when you can really unleash the true power of generative AI on a use case by use case and customer by customer basis. And that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we are really at a crossroads between those two futures.
Okay, so let's bring that back into traditional financial services and just hear from Jehangir in terms of your view around Gen AI and how you think it will evolve.
So I'll probably build on what Lewis was just saying. I think we do need to be concerned about some of that intellectual property, about privacy, especially in regulated industries like financial services, like health. But actually, the reason I'm quite bullish, the reason I'm really excited about where this is going, is just how fast it is developing. So when the Palm paper came out from Google in 2022, they talked a lot about these emergent properties, that these models don't just get better at what they did before, they start doing things that we didn't quite predict. And that's just accelerating. Even GPT-4 that many of us use today was essentially built 2 years ago in 2022. So this is old technology. How fast this is improving is really impressive. NVIDIA now saying they're improving the hardware faster than Moore's law. So as large institutions like financial services or other industries, we need to recognize that the adoption of this technology needs to be done in a very thoughtful way so that we can recognize that actually when we come to deploy it, the state of the art will have moved forward. So we need to understand how do we adopt and how do we deploy in a very much more faster, more incremental way, learning from some of those tech businesses that have been doing this over many years, but in a very regulator-safe way.
So let's come on to one of those providers that have been doing it over many years and bring in Jerzy at this point. So Jerzy, from your perspective, I mean, in terms of AI succeeding, what are you doing? What are you building? Can you give us an example of where you see those productivity gains?
Yeah, so right now we're focusing all on generative AI, and that's because it's like booming. It's like only last year we developed over 20 Gen AI applications, and but that's not everything, right? We've been doing machine learning models for years now, and they are also giving us huge productivity gains. For example, we did a credit scoring system that is deployed in 7 banks in Southeast Asia, and these systems are basically generating 40% more profit based on the cost reduction from comparing to the system based on the traditional scorecards that was implemented before. So we can actually use machine learning models which are in the classic terms more narrow, and we can use also generative AI, which is booming right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think just going on the credit score, I mean, I think it is worth us thinking about the future, but also thinking about what we can do now. And so, for example, on the credit score, recently a company that we worked with took all the failed credit scores, so all their people that didn't get through their traditional credit score, and put them through an open banking credit scoring mechanism. And I thought it was worth sharing the data, which I had handy, which was that 70% of those failed people actually got through the open banking credit score, some of them because of just a thin credit file. They just didn't have a lot of credit in their past. But what was even more fascinating for the company that did this is that actually when they looked at that 70% compared to their main book of lending, 48% of the open banking decision making were less likely to miss their first payment. 35% were less likely to either be 1 or 2 payments down in 3 months, and then even 33% less likely to be down 2 payments after 6 months, which for that business means that the actual 70% they had lent to, which had failed, were less risk than their current lending book, which is fascinating.
Unbelievable. Lewis, do you want to add to that in terms of where you see AI succeeding?
Of course. So we transform complex documents like loans and derivatives documents into structured, usable data. And we serve 2/3 of the biggest American banks and 1/4 of the biggest European banks. And I think one of the really, one of the things that, one of the biggest use cases for us is in the capital market space is following the financial crisis and actually following also SVB last year. A bunch of regulations came about. Dodd-Frank, BRRD, et cetera, here in Europe. And the whole thing is try to prevent another financial crisis. And what's really sort of exciting for us, for example, at Goldman Sachs, we process all of their capital markets documentation. So every single time Goldman executes any of its, ISDAs, derivatives contracts, we suck in the documents. We answer complex questions like if Goldman gets downgraded to BB. Hopefully it never does for the GS people in this room. What is additional collateral you need to post? Questions like that's inside these documents in which you need to completely understand the language and the nuance and the domain-specific language, right? And we're able to achieve 92% straight-through processing, meaning 92% of the answers we answer for Goldman get sent directly to the Federal Reserve and FDIC without any human intervention. So this level of automation for something that's extremely highly skilled white-collar job labor It's something that's now, actually we've been doing this for years now, but it's now modern AI technology can do this for highly regulated financial institutions.
I mean, I just wanted to say something quite funny about, the applicability of the language model. So we run it in-house. We try and do as much in-house at Moneyhub to leverage the administration, side. And actually, for a small business, we even have lots of policies, which, I despair at. You've probably got a few more. But anyway, and we pointed, our AI engine at the HR policies and said, what happens, if your dog dies, because, you actually Moneyhub get a day's leave, if your dog dies. And we just thought we'd test it out, and it was amazing the answer it came back with. It was in the context of the language. It was like, really sad to see, hear that your dog's died, and, these are all the things that you can do. And then I'm like, oh, what happens if your rabbit dies, right? Because you don't get any leave if your rabbit dies. So I'm like, what happens if your rabbit dies? And it's like, oh, really sad to hear about the rabbit, but, there isn't any actual leave. And it just went off and said, but you could take some time off, you could do this. I was gobsmacked about the tone of voice, the whole bit that it can do, to your point, so elegantly, effortlessly, and like that.
So let's bring back in Jehangir here. I mean, you probably have one of the most difficult jobs in terms of trying to find not just supporting yourself, but also the success of other fintechs, mid-markets, other businesses. I mean, how do you see this evolvement happening?
So I think what's really interesting working in a large organization is that you don't just have a bunch of customers, you work in a load of geographies that mean you have wider stakeholders. And as an organization which has hundreds of data scientists, people with deep expertise in all of this technology, we're actually trying to find ways that we can work with some of the businesses and the communities we work with and share some of that expertise. In the examples we were hearing from Lewis, you can do a lot with an LLM, which is far smaller than the latest Claude 3 model or the latest from GPT-4. You can do a lot, and you can try and think about how do you deploy it yourself, how do you do these things at a scale that makes sense to you. So you have that data lineage, that control. That's really important in a regulated world. We were doing some tests with some of the communities we work in Leeds, for example. I attended some workshops there with some of the startups and founders who are trying to really adopt the latest technology for their own industries. And I think that's really important. But to build on what we just heard, I think that the trick, especially when you're trying to deploy something like generative AI, is to understand how do I control some of the risks. So it's very powerful. This technology is so accessible, right? Everyone here probably got an OpenAI account to try out ChatGPT. That's very unlike many other technologies. So it's very well understood. But we all know it can hallucinate. So what do you do about some of that hallucination? What do you do when it's giving you not quite the right answer? It's very impressive it gave you the right answer for the rabbit. You should have tried some more obscure animals to see what it would do for the budgerigar or the goldfish. And that's certainly some of the things that we've been learning about and trying to find ways to make sure we make this adoption as safe and as useful as possible.
Thank you. So we've talked very much about what we're doing today. I'm just going to ask for some predictions. So if I come to Lewis and Jerzy and just ask you, what do you think the fastest disruption in AI is likely to be? And where do you think the increase in productivity could come from? Have you got an example that you could maybe share with us?
I think the fastest example that we're seeing today, we're already seeing, I think, is in the customer support space, although Air Canada notwithstanding, if those who know that story. I actually think that that's something that we're seeing just a tremendous adoption. It's not what we do, but it's sort of an adjacent sort of area where you're just seeing every little 5-person startup can have a live customer agent. Right, and I think that is probably one of the areas, assuming you find the right guardrail system around it, that is absolutely one of the fastest areas we're going to see disruptions with generative AI.
Well, we heard it here first. Jerzy.
Yeah, we had a lot of good, actually, examples of customer assistants like Clare AI assistant. Yeah. But the other example would be, for example, to extract information from documents. It's something more connected
That's
to
what
what
we
you
do. That is what we do. Yeah.
But we also had some projects in this aspect. And just to give you an example, we did a project to extract information from resumes and from project descriptions. These were like documents that had like a couple of pages. And just to extract information into a database, to extract like 10,000 documents, it just takes $20 to do that. So imagine how much work would need to be done to do it manually. And yeah, you have your productivity gains.
Okay. I do want to touch on safe growth, because we've talked a lot about the opportunity, but clearly doing it safely as we scale is important. Any comments on that?
Well, the easiest way to guardrail is to put human in the loop, and that's how you can do with data extraction. Just make someone double check the results, and have somebody responsible for the result. You can do that also with copilots, all kinds of copilots, not only the ones made by Microsoft, but you can do custom copilots for your agents, for your office employees that will help them based on your corporate knowledge on your data. So yeah, I think this is the first step that we should take to start implementing Gen AI when we have human in the loop, human who is going to benefit from this partnership.
Okay. Well, we've got 3/4 of the way through, and we've talked about AI, and it would be amiss of me not to bring in some of the other technologies. So I'm going to go to Sam and just say, outside of AI, how do we catapult growth in tech for financial services? What else do you see as important?
Well, just from where I sit, and having been involved with fintech for a long time now, and I just think that the big companies have to spend money with the little companies, or the little companies can't innovate and can't keep going. And I think even more so since since we've had in effect two wars, with Ukraine war and now Israel and Palestine. It's like it's putting everyone in a very position where they're cautious. And I suspect also with the government and the election, I think that also makes it. But really, to innovate, you've got to do, and I think that's what small companies will help big companies. I think that is pretty factual.
Okay, so building on that, I can't let the session finish without a question on blockchain. So I'm going to come to Jehangir and just ask, how do you see the tokenization of assets? Where do you see blockchain evolving?
So I think we've heard a lot, even today already, about how actually, especially in financial services, we have a range of assets that are very easy to tokenize. They are already intangible. It's not like you're trying to say we need to live in a virtual house. We're talking about bonds, we're talking about other financial instruments that are very readily tokenizable. And we've talked a lot today about AI. So when people look at that idea of the programmable economy, as we're talking about growth, you're saying there's a challenge there. How do we actually help things grow? So there's a school of thought that's actually saying you can look to that through the tokenization of assets, the tokenization of money, the digital currencies. And actually AI is going to play a key role there. Again, I see it as a bright future. It's going to help our economy. And I think if we can get that right, it'll be really important. Data is going to be key. So how do you actually use things like Internet of Things or digital twins to really bring that wider, rich data about the world? People talk about climate change and these other things. So can I bring in some of that geospatial data, some of that climate data, the inventory data for logistics, and actually use that in a very powerful and holistic way? Okay. One of the big challenges, I think, across this is the fact that as banks, we've been very good at working with structured data. But actually, there's a very rich set of unstructured data that, again, some of those earlier technologies, very accessible technologies in Gen AI, will help as we look to the programmable future.
Okay, thank you. Well, look, in wrapping up, I'm just going to ask for a quick soundbite advice to our audience today in terms of how we galvanize that opportunity, particularly in the UK. So if we could keep it very, very quick to a few words, what is that advice as you leave here today? Lewis, do you want to kick us off?
I said it before, just start working with the AI today.
Thank you.
My advice would be to upskill your employees, because if they understand the technology, they can find the right use cases, and they will be more proficient in using this technology.
For me, I think it's no more people like me. It's just me, right? So personalization, we've got the power. We should use it.
So true. Jehangir.
I think all of that. I think for those reasons, the future's really bright. It's moving really fast, so just enjoy the ride.
Okay. Please put your hands together for our panel today. Thank you very much.